Correct me if I'm wrong. Is it man, I forgot the slogan. Queer Jedi?
Queer Jedi.
Okay,
Yes, Queer
perfect.
Jedi. That's right.
All right, can I use that?
Yes,
All
please
right,
do.
good. Because I love that. I forgot who said it in base camp, and I was like, that's perfect. Like,
Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
what a slogan, you know?
Thanks.
Yes.
Yes.
Cool. Everybody, welcome to the Blacklist, the show where we interview the elite. Today we have Jen Self. They are the Queer Jedi, and today's going to be a phenomenal interview. So, for people that don't know who you are, please explain yourself a little bit to the audience, what you do, and kind of what you stand for.
Okay, great. The Queer Jedi. I love how you said it too. So good.
Well, I mean, I love the slogan.
A lot of energy. Yeah, the Queer Jedi. So, well, for a long time, I've worked directly with queer and trans youth. I worked in higher education for almost 20 years.
Yep.
I founded the Q Center at the University of Washington along with the students there. And really what I tried to do is center anti-racism in that work.
Yeah.
Because so much of queer work is done from really a white perspective, really only serving white, queer, and trans people.
Yeah.
And so we really centered anti-racism, and so that's been a core of the work that I've done for longer than 20 years. Let's just say that. And so right before the pandemic, I was leaving that job, and I had been doing consulting on the side for a long time. And I decided that I wanted to do that with organizations. And so I've been doing that with leaders who are ready to really change the cultures of their organizations and to change their own leadership.
Yeah.
And I do that in partnership with Black and Brown educators and leaders and healers who have been doing that work for also a very long time.
Yeah. Now, I love that because, one, I think it's kind of underrepresented. But two, I think this is the perfect time to kind of do it because there's more eyeballs, I think, on this. Now, with leaders that are wanting to make the change, how does that usually look like? They contact you and they're like, look, I know there's some systemic changes that we need to make inside of this company, or how does that look like?
Well, let's get real. In 2020, a lot of leaders in their organizations said, "Oh, we have a problem with racism in this country," and they didn't know that was happening before. And so for a little while there in 2020, it looked like maybe we would have some organizations really want to have an effort and change things. And now we're a few years out, and a lot of those organizations have faded into the woodwork and gone back to their old ways. So the leaders who really are wanting to sustain a change are the ones who are standing out now.
Yeah.
And those leaders are wanting to really figure out, how do we put equity into every single thing we're doing, every minute, every day, all the time.
Yeah.
And that means sustained work. That means working with people who have been living this, breathing this, and their whole lives, and working with us to know how to implement it at every single level. And that's at your thinking, that's at your heart level, that's at how you hire, that's at how you think about who you hire, that's at how you think about how you talk in meetings, that's how you think about how you set up them. It's in every single thing you do all the time, every day.
Yeah. Walk me through two things that I'm very curious about. Number one, people, I think, turn a blind eye to this. So why is it important that they don't? And then number two, why is this important to you specifically?
Well, it's important to me because, I've lived, one, let's just talk about me personally. I have lived a life where, I knew pretty early on that I wasn't like a lot of people around me. Now, I'm white, and so I've lived a life of privilege around my skin color, but I've also lived a life where I knew that I didn't belong very early on. I knew that I was genderqueer. I knew that I was queer. I didn't have those words, but I knew that I certainly wasn't like anybody else around me. And I spent a lot of my time looking around for other people who would understand me and would understand that. And I, in my small town in Oregon, I really didn't see a lot of people know a lot of people who understood that. And so it kind of put me on a mission of like, well, what does justice actually mean? What
Yeah.
what does that mean to me? What does that mean to my family? And I got a little bit of information and a little bit of training from my family about that, but not probably not great, probably not great information, not great training. And so, I was a basketball player as an athlete. And when I went to college, I left my little small town in Oregon, which was predominantly white, and went to UC Berkeley, which at that time was not predominantly white, was really kind of the mix of people from all over the world, and played on a basketball team for the first time with Black women and women of color, and had the opportunity to really start confronting the ways that I had been taught racism and white supremacy, just growing up in my little town.
Yeah.
And when I saw the ways that this had been impacting the people who I really grew to care about, the people on my team, the women that I loved, I figured out, oh, these are people who I had been looking for my whole life. These are the people who understand justice in a way that I had been trying to figure it out. And also, they've been hurt by something that I'm just now understanding is inside me.
Yeah.
And I have been not only kind of reaping the privileges of it, but also perpetrating it in ways that I no longer want to perpetrate, and I no longer want to stand by and watch other people perpetrate.
Yeah.
Because I love these people, and that was pretty much the end of my life as the way I knew it at that point, and
Yeah.
the beginning of my life of really just making a decision at that point of like I'm gonna do this thing, this anti-racism thing, every day for myself internally, and make this change for myself. And I looked around and I knew that white people we weren't very good at being consistent. We were pretty good at being really inconsistent. And I knew that if I just woke up every day and decided today, this is what I'm going to focus on, that I would be doing something different and I could make an impact, at least in the lives of the people around me.
Yeah.
And as I started doing that, then that started becoming more and more outside of my own life and out and into my work. And that's how that became integrated. And now it's really my spiritual path, honestly.
Yeah. You know what I love about what you said? You said that you started doing it because of the people that you love, right? Like you didn't want to continue, perpetrating. However, you would. I don't know exactly, but you did it first because of that, and then to me, that's probably the first time I've ever heard that in this sort of scenario. Because usually what's portrayed in the media, at least from like what I find, is not that whatsoever. It's not that you want to protect the people that you love. It's the fact that people don't want to use either correct pronouns because of whatever, right? Their right to do so, or it's just different things other than what you just said. And what you just said, I feel like is hard to argue because why would you want to argue that? You're just trying to protect people that you care about, so that way they feel included. That way, like you said, growing up, you felt like you were different. So all you're doing is just making their life easier,
Yeah.
right? Anyways, I love that.
Thanks.
How does that transition into corporate work or company work? Yeah.
Right. So corporate work. So what I just described to me is sort of like the individual and interpersonal level
Yep.
of where racism and where oppression takes place, and then the corporate level is really when we start to think about how has racism been inculcated within our systems, and so that's what we're really talking about corporates, corporations, is systemic racism, and so when we think about the corporate setting, we are looking at ways that people have been excluded or kept from, being able to make it to higher position,
Yeah.
or if we look at if we look at who really runs corporate America, we look at white men and then white women and then perhaps some men of color, and then really we look at Black women who are really still the very bottom of this corporate America. Even though we will point to one or two Black women who are running corporations, and we'll say,
Right.
oh, but look, these women have succeeded. They're just succeeding too. But when we look at the numbers, that's just not the case.
Yeah.
So we're talking about systemic the systemic ability to keep people from actually being able to have the kind of life and that they should be able to have in this country.
Yeah.
Entire groups of people. And so that's what corporate work is about. It's about changing the systems that have been in place since the beginning of this country.
Yeah, and correct me if I'm wrong, but like for leaders and in their organizations, but is it blind spots that for the reason why that's kind of there? Because I'm assuming, and I'm assuming that they're not trying to do that. Is that right?
I think
Or some?
I think I think that a lot of leaders are not trying to do that.
Yeah.
I certainly think that there are some who are sure actively trying to do what they're trying to do, and then there are some who really believe that there is not a problem with racism or with any form of oppression. They
Yep.
truly believe in a free market, and that you give a free market and anybody can succeed, and all of that. And that there's never been a problem in this country.
That's a very popular topic. Yep.
Yes, and then I think there are some who really just don't know what to do.
Yeah.
Honestly, they want to do the right thing. They want to create equity, but they have no idea what to do, and actually don't even know where to turn. Sometimes they're the most frustrating though, because they will be willing to say that, and then they'll hire the experts, and then we'll come in, and then they'll a little bit fight with us.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, oh, okay.
And what part do they fight?
Well, I think it's hard. I think it's really hard for folks to relinquish some of their belief that they don't know something, or that they don't know how to lead in a particular way.
Yeah.
And there's so many aspects of equity work that may seem that can seem counterintuitive, and also equity work requires us to slow down.
Yeah.
And that's the last thing we want to do in a corporation, is actually to slow down. It takes time. We have to slow down our thinking. We often have to slow down our processes.
Yep.
And that is not a thing that often folks who are leading corporations want to do, is slow down.
100%. Right? I feel like that's counterintuitive.
Yeah.
Okay. And what's the result that happens after, for example, you come in, and you kind of see things as they are? Which, first of all, I think that's extremely hard to kind of just see from the outside view, is like how things are, which I want to get into. But what's the result that happens after you kind of come in?
Well, it depends on what folks are willing to hire us to do.
Yeah.
Sometimes what's been historically what's happened with a lot of this kind of work is that leaders have wanted to hire people to do a training here or there, and that really doesn't change a whole lot. We're really talking about culture change, and culture change, as I was saying earlier, really takes sustained effort, and it requires you to change everything, everywhere, all the time.
Yeah.
And so when somebody really wants to do that, then it's really about first that leader really taking a look at themselves and their own leadership, and every aspect of their own leadership, and how they think about leadership, how they think about hierarchy, how they think about how they lead, how they talk to the people that they are leading, how they who they're asking to be on their team, how they think
Sure.
about their team, right? Everything,
Yeah.
all of those things. So when we're working with an organization, like I'm working with an organization right now who we're working with. I have a team of 3, and we're doing some strategic planning with this organization. And we've been working with them since October. And one of the first things that we did was work with their executive director to really hone in on what his vision was around this new mission and vision. And because he really was trying to take this organization and shift it to a focus, to have the focus really centered around anti-racism. It's an organization that works with the unhoused, and he was clear that he wanted to make sure that the state knew that he believed that poverty is rooted in inequality. It's rooted in racism and colonialism.
Yep.
So we helped him hone how to say that into his mission and vision. And that was one of the first things that he really needed to do, so that he had something that he could say, this is where we're going.
Right. Yep.
So that was the first thing we did.
Yeah. No, I think that's super important. And when you're kind of like working with a company, and is it like, so walk me through, how do you catch certain things that, are like not acceptable, that like they just don't know about? Because I'm assuming it's like, yes, you can teach someone or you can kind of help integrate some systems, but there's going to be times where, they just slip up or, whatever. How are you catching that?
Right. So some of that, right, some of that is not necessarily directly in the expertise of all of the folks that are on my team, or we have people on our team who do that. Like we work with one person who is a lawyer, and what she can do, what her whole specialty is to look at the policies and procedures of all organizations, and she can go through them, and she reads them for an equity lens, and so she'll go through them and rewrite them so that and then give them back to the organization. And she's now rewritten them, and they have all of their policies are now rewritten with centering an anti-racist perspective, right?
Yeah.
And so working with her gives us the advantage of having someone who has this legal background and is able to make sure that everything that are in the policies has the legal standing and all of that. We're able to look at those and be able to say, okay, well, the wording here or this or that, we can be able to look at that, but we want to have somebody who has the legal background to be able to back that up. So
Yeah. Well, one thing that I like that you said earlier is like your team is not just kind of made up of you and your perspective. It's like you also have brown and black leaders.
absolutely.
Which I think is important because your whole focus is not just one thing. It's a cultural thing, which kind of encompasses a lot. It encompasses racism, encompasses when people have discrimination against certain people. How did that kind of come to be when you were leaving the UW Center?
Right. Well, I was hired I was actually hired as a consultant at University of Washington.
Yeah.
And I met a woman named Desiree Wilkins Finch, and she's a consultant in her own right, and we just hit it off. And so in the time, we were working with the School of Public Health at the time, and so we did a little bit of work with them, mostly doing some affinity groups and that kind of thing. And over the course of the last few years, we've just really like built a friendship and built a partnership, the two of us, and then a third person, Liz Cruz. We were working with her, and the three of us really have a great working relationship.
Yeah.
And we have really different ways of thinking, which is part of what makes us work really well together.
Yep.
And then Desiree's sister is the lawyer that I was talking about.
Nice.
Right. And so the four of us working together is just, it's such a great team because we bring these different ways of thinking, and we bring really vastly different life experiences and different identities, not just racial identities, but also gender and economic, and also like we grew up in different areas, so we have a lot of different ways of thinking about things and looking at the different perspectives in the organizations that we're working in.
Yeah. Well, now one thing that I want to talk about is, imagine a business owner, an entrepreneur, or company owner is like watching this interview, and to them, they only care about numbers, revenue, profit,
Right.
whatever, right?
Right.
How can this play a role into that when you give other people more opportunity, when you don't discriminate, when you kind of remove the systemic oppression? Is it beneficial? Which I know the answer is yes.
The answer is yes.
But it's more for them that like they're hearing this and they're like, okay, great, inclusion, that's amazing, that's phenomenal. I want to make people feel better. How does that improve their bottom line?
Well, one is it's just good business. I mean, look at the United States. I mean, we are now pretty much 50%. We are Black and brown people. Look at the numbers of people who are identifying as queer, bisexual, lesbian, gay, all of the different ways that we are identifying. The demographics of this country are changing pretty rapidly, and so just in terms of who lives here,
Yep.
if we want to serve who lives here, we really
Right.
right. So that's one thing. But the other aspect is that what we know is that when you create an organization that creates equity and opportunity, you retain the people that you hire.
Yeah.
And right now, what's happening is that when folks are hiring, they are losing people over and over and over again. So they are having to go through hiring processes and onboarding processes over and over and over. And that's lost time, that's lost money. So that right there
Yeah.
is a bottom line that you want to change.
So it's not just millennials leaving then. Is that
No,
right?
it's not just millennials. That's right.
Because I had a company here like a few months ago. They had worked with Apple to kind of create more of a creative just workforce, right? More of a cultural thing instead of like a dictatorship where a lot of companies I feel like they have more of a dictatorship.
Right.
And they're saying the same thing. The stats when it comes down to it, the dictators that are running their company, if people are only listening to one person, then they're not going to go as far as if they, would include more people. And like you said, it is very difficult when you hire new staff. The onboarding process takes, I don't know how long, but like it's not a quick and easy thing to do.
No.
And especially if you've had an employee or a team member that's been there for years, to be able to train somebody to get up to that point is a hassle.
Yeah.
So keeping people, it's kind of like with working with customers. It's very easy to keep a customer than it is to acquire a new one. So I think the same thing is with like your team, right? And that does help. Yeah, that does help their bottom line.
Yes, for
So
sure.
very good. So for people that are listening, what's one piece of advice that you would give that they could take home today for their company and just start establishing more of that of what you teach into their company?
Well, I mean, one of the things I think if you feel like I don't know what to do, first of all, don't put the onus on your own employees. That's so much of what happens right now.
What does that mean?
Okay, so don't put the burden on your own employees to
Okay.
teach you, because right now what happens is often our leaders are turning to their Black and brown employees and saying, "Help us with diversity or help us with equity. Tell us what to do," and then they're not getting paid for that work,
Yeah.
but they have the burden of that work. Same thing with queer and trans employees. That burden is there, but there's no extra pay. There's no reward for it.
Yep.
So don't do that. Don't put the burden on your employees. If you don't know what to do, get expert help from outside. Hire somebody, and do your own learning. I always say that. I hear so many consultants say this: Google is your friend. You can just really, there's so much good information, just simple things. I mean, simple things like, how do I run a meeting with a better, with more equity? There are so many good resources online about how to create a more equitable kind of meeting. That I created a resource based on just going online and going through all of the things that came up during the pandemic that many different consultants wrote and put out there, and collected their information. And I gave you all credit, so don't worry. I gave you all credit, and put it together and have given that to organizations, so that they not only do they have the resources of how can we do this better in meetings, but also who are all these people that we could also call on if we needed help in the organization.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Okay, well, great. It was amazing having you on. Where can people find you?
They can find me at brick13.com. It's really easy. Or Dr. J _ brick13 or Queer Jedi.
Perfect.
Yes.
I love that. Well, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you so much.
Now let's get some pictures.